Hi, I'm Marcel, and welcome to me screaming into the void mostly about books. For my 25 in 25 challenge, I'm doing 2 reading challenges. That is In the Search of Wonder, who has the challenge Reading the Classics, where she has 12 different prompts that we have to fit in with classical books. And we have Reading the Globe, created by Scully Dangling and Reading with Katja, where they picked out 12 different books from around the world that we read and discuss. So for March, they had the book We Do Not Part by Han Kang for the Reading Around the World, or Reading Around the Globe challenge. And Han Kang is, of course, the South Korean author who won the Nobel Prize in 2024. And I have to admit, the book is about a young woman who travels to the island of, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this correctly, Jeonju, and to help a friend who is in hospital. And so she's going to feed a bird because the bird can die unless someone feeds it, which is true. Feed your animals. But what then happens when she comes to this island, and this is something I didn't know about South Korean history or Korean history, is that right before the outbreak of the Korean War, there was a massacre on this Jeju island called the Jeju Massacre. And the book is, of course, about she is traveling and she's meeting this friend's family, and slowly all of this is unraveling in regard to what happened during the massacre on the island. But it took a while before I understood that she was referring to Jeju Island Massacre, because I didn't know it exists, and not the Korean War. So I was reading it like she was, and then the Korean War, and that happened, and that happened. And I've never been in South Korea, but I have been to North Korea. So I do find how different countries present wars to be fascinating, and especially one like the Korean War, because there is such a rift that has happened due to that war, but also because the war is, in some sense, still ongoing. The fact that we are calling it North and South Korea is something wrong. You're supposed to just have one Korea. But of course, everything that has happened, how these two nations and cultures have developed, how can you then sort of fix this into one country again? But what about families who were split up during the war? How do they heal? How do they understand what happened? And there are still people in Korea who has siblings and cousins on either side of North and South Korea divide. So that was my bad when reading the book, and I was both very into it. I was very like, oh yeah, this is such an interesting way of talking about this war and how you're dealing with the aftermath and all of the body aspect of it. I mean, Han Kang is very I've read The Vegetarian, so I've started reading more and more about her books, and she is very visceral in her writing. She's not gory. Okay, here's my argument. I will say she's not gory. What she is blunt. She presents the human body as the human body is, not hiding behind euphemisms that we usually do, especially when it comes to the more, well, gooey parts of the human body, in lack of a better term. But that says we can't talk about the human body. It becomes weird. There's so many cultures that are socialized to sort of do not talk about the human body because it's weird. We do not like it. It's just there. And we all know it's there, but it's, call it something else than what it is. And then you have to have a euphemism for the euphemism for the euphemism after a while. So I was so into it. I was so, this is such a wonderful theme to talk about in regard to healing, in regard to how can I deal with everything that has happened, and our view on the government and propaganda, and not the least propaganda. But at the same time, I was like, okay, why? So there was something in the back of my mind that didn't fit the things I knew about the Korean War. I am by no means an expert. So that's why it took so long, because despite it being like something in the back of my mind were like, what? Huh? A bit confusing. I was like, I have no idea about the Korean War. I've been to North Korea and I've read a bit about it. I'm by no means an expert. That is why you're confused. And then I realized about halfway, 2/3 in, that it was like, this is not about the Korean War. My bad. Brilliant book. I'm sorry. I just... My reading comprehensions when reading this book, I don't know where it went. I can't understand how I could have messed up something so basic about the book. I really enjoyed it. I have to admit, I am enjoying reading Han Kang's work more and more. And I think one of the things is the bluntness. It is the fact that she is just, here's the facts. This is the body. This is how things work. This is just a part of your body. Why are you weird about it? Because it makes me want to think, why am I weird about it? I know it's weird, but why am I weird about it? So I don't know if it was the journey that Han Kang wanted me to have when reading a book, but I did have a journey reading the book. And for In Search of Wonder, she wanted me to read children's classics. So I read by Torbjørn Egner, When the Robbers Came to Cardamom Town. This is a Norwegian children's book, and it was written in the 1950s, so it's kind of an old book. And it's about these three robbers, and I think two of them, the way they've been illustrated, are brothers, which was one of the prompts she wanted me to look for. It's a sense of small vignettes of Cardamom Town, and especially centering around these three robbers and how they are trying to make a living in Cardamom Town, and then how they are being rehabilitated at the end. And one of the things that made me want to reread this book, it's a very cute book. And there is a bunch of songs in the book that you can either read, or if you, like me, have been raised on Torbjørn Egner and have heard these songs been played since you were a kid, you're reading it and suddenly you're breaking out into song. But one of the things I enjoyed about the book, and why I want to read it, is that there is some research that was done on the Norwegian crime perspective. Because Norway, I don't really think why Norway specifically. I don't think it's just Norway. But especially when regarding to the US, a lot of journalists have traveled from the US to Norway to try to understand why the criminal system in Norway is the way it is, because it's so focused on rehabilitation and not punishment. And in part it works. You can absolutely have a discussion in how it works. And people have commented on a lot of this journalistic work that prisoners in Norway have it better than people outside of prison. Not necessarily in Norway, but in among other things, the US. And what that research pointed to is that Torbjørn Egner's books, both this one and another one he had about a bunch of animals, that is about the fox and all of the carnivores who are being rehabilitated, because you can't live in a society if half of the population is trying to eat the other half of the population. A lot of the books are about people who have done bad, but is then introduced back into society, and that it is society's role to help people who have done wrong but are now repenting, wanting to get back into society. It is society's role and purpose to help them get back into society. And that is very much an idea and the ideal of Torbjørn Egner's books. And this research actually sort of showed how growing up with Torbjørn Egner as sort of the cultural icon that it was, especially in regarding to children's literature, might have actually influenced the way we have structured how we deal with criminals, where rehabilitation is the main idea and the main ideal. So I wanted to just reread it because, of course, it made me interested. Oh, could this be? And I absolutely think that it can, you can absolutely understand it that way. There is nothing that sort of says, oh, poor things to sort of the criminals. They're not getting empathy and sympathy just because they are criminals. But people are very, and they're doing it in different ways throughout the book, trying to help them see that what they are doing isn't a correct way, isn't a good way of doing it. Because it's a children's literature and written by someone who's Norwegian, of course it ends up with them being rehabilitated. So that was actually very interesting and made me sort of try to think a lot about how does our children's literature influence the way society organizes certain aspects of their life. And if that is the case, if children's literature does have the power to, at least in part, influence how an entire criminal system is organized, why aren't we giving children's literature more due? And apart thinking about it in a discussion I have regarding the Nobel Prize of Literature, because I'm of course doing projects around that, and someone asked, has anyone who has written children's literature, mainly written children's literature, ever won the Nobel Prize of Literature? And I can only think of one, which was Rudyard Kipling, who won, or who is most famously known for The Jungle Book and Kim. But no other children's literature has one. And you rarely see children's literature win sort of prestigious awards that are open for all books. You have certain awards that are just for children's literature, but children's literature never enters into the collective space when we discuss literature. And that's an interesting thought, I think. So what do you think? Should we talk more about children's literature? And how do we then do that across lines? How many children's literature from another country than the one you grew up with have you read? Let me know in the comments down below, and thank you for listening to me screaming into the void.